Well, it's good to be back with you all from all the way from down under in Australia. It was fun, actually. I didn't even think about it with picking that psalm out, but thinking about all the different animals together and the child with the snakes. But it was our kids with the kangaroos at the farm. And most of the time when I had chatted with people about our kids doing this, their experience of kangaroos online is watching kangaroos box and duke it out with grown-ups and small children and animals. So what I'm saying, they're just laying around like lazy cattle on the ground that you can go feed with by hand and have a lot of fun. But it was a good time. So it's just you get to experience a little taste of what is to come when the kangaroos are just laid out because of the heat and enjoying being pet by all the little kids. But it was a great time, but it's so good to be back with you all here for this first Sunday in Advent, and I can't believe it's been a couple Sundays since we've been here. But how many of you actually like to wait? You just like to wait, you like to just sit and, twiddle your thumbs, and, there's the proverbial waiting on paint to dry, right, or water to boil if you're just sitting there watching it, or you're just waiting to get better, or maybe to get to sleep. That's how I felt on the airplane, because I was sitting on the outside of the aisle every single time, and I don't know if you know this, and it was funny, actually, Pam, when I stood up in the office one day, you're like, I didn't realize how big you are. I am physically wider than the seats on an airplane. I don't know if you know that, but I came to really understand that well, as every single time that you're trying to sleep and somebody walks by, wham, huh, wham, huh. It was like sleep deprivation and torture for a lot of hours, but like we wait to get to sleep. We wait for all kinds of things, right? And it's one thing to wait for something that you've anticipated or what but it's another thing to think about waiting on stuff you didn't expect to endure, or to have to exercise patience and wait longer than what you thought was a reasonable amount of time. Or, again, how about when you make big plans to go see your brother on the other side of the planet? You've waited for 4 years to even see him face to face. You've arranged your schedule, and you've saved, and you've planned, and you've waited, and you've waited, and waited. And then the very first step of the journey is you get to the airplane, you're like, hey, I'm gonna wait through this process. But then you get to wait even longer because the plane has been delayed. And you get to hang out with a whole bunch of really grumpy people that are getting hangry because they're the last flight out of Spokane. Right, this is not the airport experience I was looking for. And to add salt to the wound, I was like, okay, it's gonna be fun. I'm getting a little gaming toy. I'm gonna play while I wait and just have some fun while I'm sitting around a whole lot. It was gonna show up late, so I never had it the entire trip. So that left me to do one thing. It was to work. Or to write and to work in the waiting, but then I was like, but I'm sitting there and I'm starting to work on this message, and I'm like, but I'm waiting, and this is supposed to be vacation. Isn't this vacation? Wasn't this supposed to be this long-awaited downtime? But maybe God knew something I didn't. And I started to write this. It was like peeking around the corner of what would it be like 2 weeks from then. To be, maybe this was the time to start to reflect on what it means to wait and have to practice it. Because it was only the first of many waiting experiences on the trip. It was a good time to have that moment before everything even got started, to have a well-informed response to waiting and letting those themes and narratives and the biblical narratives shape my response to a lot of time being stuck waiting. So how do we wait well? Or how well do you wait? Because when we want to wait for something, we often can, but if we don't want to, we see it as a hindrance. And it's worth talking about this idea of waiting in this first week of Advent, because it's a key issue for the season. We're in the season of waiting. That's embedded in the definition of Advent, which in Latin just means coming. And if something is coming, that means it's not here yet. And this first week's theme is typically on hope, which means, again, it's something that's not here yet. If you have a Christmas package coming, it means it's not here yet. Or if you're hoping something's going to be here, it's still not here yet. You're waiting. Any which way, if you're hoping or if you're anticipating, you're still waiting. And as much as we declare we have patience that we can wait, we usually don't have to, do we? We have reshaped the world around us to have to wait for the most minimal amounts of time. We don't like to wait in lines or on the phone or for our food or for our coffee. And we've done everything in our power to avoid the proverbial experience of waiting. With 5G and Wi-Fi everywhere, as I sat and started working on this message, there's a sea of screens outside the Starbucks of Spokane International, Gate C. Right? And you know it was bad when the staff starts to break out the snack cart to appease the hangry masses. And the irony is that all of this is how we wait is how we live. Because we're not just in a season of waiting, but a lifetime of it. Because we're all waiting on something or someone, or ultimately we're waiting on God. And that's what makes songs or psalms like Psalm 40 or Psalm 62 so powerful and profound. Because how well we wait reveals what we're trusting moment by moment. How we wait reveals who we trust, because it reminds us we're not always the ones deciding how we get to where we think we're going. If we trust what is to come, then we can wait well. But if we don't, if we're trying to take things into our own hands, maybe we're not doing so well with that. And the proverbial complaint is that God seems to be taking his time, not acting in the way we'd want him to, or as urgently or as decisively as we would dictate. And that's not a new thing. And much of what we read in the Psalms, in the writings, and the prophets echo that very sentiment. So, God, why are you not intervening now? That's where, by the time you get to Peter, he's telling them, hey, don't forget this one thing, dear friends. The time for the Lord is not the same as it is for us. And the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise. Instead, he's patient because he's trying to accomplish something. And it's more than we can handle. Because our goals and our ambitions and the things that drive us are not always in line with what God is setting out to accomplish. So how can we wait long enough for us to grow? How do we know that God is good in the meantime, though? Even Lamentations picks up on this theme in Lamentations 3:25. It says that the Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. And when we're put into a place of waiting, do we see that as the Lord being good to us? Or do we use that time of waiting to seek him? Or when Jesus tells us about the parable of the 10 bridesmaids in Matthew 25, right? How we wait matters. And what we do while we wait is something that echoes into eternity. And maybe you send a message or a text or an email and you're left waiting to hear back, and you're left wondering what's going to happen next. And you have to wait before you move on. It's even worse when you see they read it and they haven't responded. Oh. What are you going to do then? I can see you read this. How well do we wait? What happens when you stand in line? When you're stuck in the queue, waiting for everybody to go through at Costco, and it's Christmas time and everybody's buying presents and they have cartfuls of things. It was actually entertaining for my brother's big 40th birthday party that I got to cook for. We had 2 Costco-sized carts so overloaded, it took 3 carts to get it out the door and another Costco employee. So that's how much food that I got to cook. But it's like how well do we wait in line? And or what about when you're expecting a package at the door and it's not there yet? You're going to Australia and you want to play games, you want to have fun, and it's not coming. How long can you wait? And we all like the idea of delayed gratification, and we know that's important to train our kids and to develop that skill, but what about as adults? What happens if you can afford it, if you have access to it? Do you realize that good is the enemy of best? I suggest that the only thing we're good at waiting most often is waiting on answering our door or waiting on picking up our phones anymore. And how much that has changed since childhood. I remember when the phone would ring as a kid and you would race your siblings to answer the phone. Be like, I want to be the one to find out who's on the other end. And you run. And you're clambering over couches, especially after school, because it might be one of your friends that's calling. Just maybe. Or when somebody knocks at the door, now instead of again, same thing. Do we run to the door because we're excited to see who's on the other side? Or do we do what we so do we just check our Ring camera, or do we say I'm not really home? It's I can see your car is here. What do we do? No, we hide away. That's the only thing we're good at waiting, is to avoid people. But most of the time when we're waiting in places we have no control, it's when we're with people. Oh, the irony. But we even dread, we silence our phones because we just don't want to hear it anymore. And it's we've just been ruined by too many phone calls of telemarketers, for one. Or people wanting something from us at the door. But something happened somewhere in the shift from childhood. We lost the excitement for interruption and the willingness to have our agendas and schedules and our plans altered. Because we have our plans in motion and cannot set them aside. And I'd suggest with that, we're still struggling with Sabbath keeping, of keeping margin in our schedules, because we're fearful of the future and we cannot wait to do what we ourselves would want rather than waiting on the Lord. Waiting on Him to fill our schedules, letting His goals, His trajectory set our life goals. So what's worth waiting for? And there's been a lot of waiting on Jesus, and that's what this kind of season is themed on, right, on both sides of His earthly ministry. So much that Paul has to remind the church in Thessalonica to get back to the business of living, to doing something while they're waiting. And again, this is what he's picking up on in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5. But he basically is just saying, you're not going to wonder or miss when Jesus returns again. You'll get knocked off your feet. That's what it means to be raptured. So we can get a lot of convoluted theology on something that was meant to say, hey, start to live. But what about those waiting for the promised one of God to come? And that's what Isaiah tells us in Isaiah 11:1, that a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, from his roots a branch will bear fruit. And now when we come to promises like this, this is not a good moment to be waiting. Because if all you've got left of the tree is a stump, what does that mean happened to the rest of the tree? It's not good. It's a Christmas tree, isn't it? But something that's so good, it means that the rest of the tree is gone. And here's a little bit of troubling imagery too. If you've got a stump of a tree and the rest is hauled off to make something or do something with it, what if that something looks like something that's hanging in every single church? But here's the point. If you're aiming to get fruit from a tree that's been left for dead, it's going to take a long, long time. You'd have to wait. Because even when you start, plant a good-sized start from a nursery, or you get the Costco-sized tree, you go out there and plant it in your yard, it takes years before you'll get a decent amount of fruit, won't it? I was hoping John would still be in here for this one. But it takes longer and longer and longer to get a decent harvest. It's years in the making. That's a lot of waiting. And the historical setting of when Isaiah is actually saying this setting is brutal. Why do you think Isaiah is picking up on the stump imagery to begin with? It's because Assyria has destroyed Israel and cut down all the trees. They have decimated Israel. It is not looking good. And meanwhile, Isaiah goes out and he goes out prophesying that while standing among the cemetery of stumps, it was not looking good on the outlook. It would be like, Angie and I coming back with the family after, the trip down under to see that all of Spokane County had been conquered by the Canadians and they cut down all the trees. It's like looking up and just seeing stumps on Mount Spokane, this bald, bleak thing, right? If that happened, how would you feel? Would you be angry or depressed or just feel deflated and empty, hollowed out, like you just can't do anything? Would you react by pounding your fist or just emotionally check out? Well, whatever you do, it's not going to bring it back anytime soon. Can't be undone. It's created a wasteland. So what next? That's why we can ask, like David in Psalm 13. He said, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? and have my enemies say that I have overcome him, and my foes are rejoicing when I fall. It says, I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Even in the waiting, David recognizes God's goodness. That in the waiting, he's been trusting. He's found joy in his salvation, and God is at work in the waiting. Even if you're waiting in your life right now, God is at work, even if we don't see it. Because there can be long seasons where it may not be easy to see how God is at work, like staring at a bunch of stumps. And we may never ever get the answer we want on this side of eternity even. But even as enemies might say that they've won, as David is saying, even when we have stumbled or taken a fall, can we continue to wait? To trust still in God's unfailing love. And here's the thing. If we say we trust God but put our trust elsewhere when times get tough, that means we don't trust God. That means we trust our own attempts or accumulation of wealth or wisdom more than we trust him. And this goes back to a familiar theme of doubting our doubts and believing our beliefs. Do we believe God has been good to us, is good to us, will be good to us? And God is being patient with us as we wait on him. And if we can take the time, maybe spend some time this time reflecting on how God might be working in your life, even if it seems to be taking a very, very long time. How long are you willing to wait if it's really worth it to you? What is worth all of your waiting? Maybe you've been asking God for something for a long time, and giving it a day is not what you want to hear, because that might be 1,000 years. Even a minute is still a long time. Psalm 62 says, though, that for God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. So what is your hope for this season? This Christmas season, and critically, where is that hope coming from? Is our hope to fill our pride or fill our appetites or our goals or plans and schedules? And the question then is basically how or who are we going to be while we wait? And interestingly enough, when we think about how we might wait, we usually think about what do we do when we wait. Because we really, want to be doing something. That's why everybody breaks out their screens, starts playing games, doing all this stuff while we're waiting. But who are we to be while we wait? Maybe we've missed something when we find we can't wait well. Maybe we're not settled with who we are and whose we are when waiting gets the best of us. And there's a story of a woman, her name was Pamela. She had a very rare eye disease, and she was a very successful CPA in her mid-30s, and she was going blind. And she tried everything. She went from doctor to doctor, and they had put her on a special diet and gave her treatments, and nothing seemed to slow the steady loss of her vision. And finally, an eye specialist told her that she had one last option open, that there was this very complicated surgery that could be performed, and if it was successful, she would be able to save some of her vision. But if unsuccessful, she would go completely blind immediately, rather than gradually progressing with the disease. And Pamela chose to have the surgery, and she emerged from that operation, though, with no sight at all and no hope for that to ever change. And Pamela's pastor went to see her in her hospital, and the pastor took her hand and said, "I'm so sorry, is there anything that you'd like me to do for you?" And Pamela said, "Yes, there is." And the pastor said, "Well, just name it." And Pamela said, "I would like a candle." And the pastor was considerably surprised by the request and said, "Fine, I'll bring one along when I come next time." And she countered with, "No, I want one now." And the pastor said, "Don't you want to talk a little bit first?" Like, "No, if you really want to do something for me, okay, I can see this is important to you." He said, "I'll go get one right now." So after the drive back to the church and back to the hospital again, makes the round trip, comes back, gives Pamela to the hospital room, hands her the candle, and approaching her bed, the pastor asked, "Do you want me to light it for you?" And Pamela said, "Oh no, just hand it to me." She took the candle in her hands, gripping it tightly. She then, clutched the candle against her and said, "During these last months, I have often thought of myself as a candle about to go out. I thought that everything I am is tied up in being able to see. I expected that when the blackness came, then there would be nothingness. She then said, "Now I'm blind and it's dark, but the candle is still here. I'm still here. I'm still me. God is still God, and it's going to be okay somehow." She experienced the candle in a very different way. She discovered that a candle is more than a fragile light. Flames come and go on candles, but as Pamela discovered, a flame doesn't make a candle. It's the candle itself that makes a candle a candle. And for her, the candle proper was the symbol of hope. Because regardless of whether it is a flame or not, her hope came in the promise of what it is to be a candle in of itself. She came to realize that hope is not grounded in what will happen to us, but in who we are. But in all that happens to us or with us or around us, right, we tend to stress and worry. And I love this Francis Chan quote, and I always come back to it because it's just so powerful. It's just that worry implies that we don't quite trust that God is big enough, powerful enough, or loving enough to take care of what's happening in our lives. Stress says that things we are involved in are more important than our merits, or to merit our impatience, our lack of grace towards others, or a tight grip of control. And basically, these two behaviors communicate that it's okay to sin and not trust God because the stuff in my life is somehow exceptional. And both worry and stress reek of arrogance. They declare a tendency to forget that we've been forgiven, that our lives here are brief, that we are headed to a place where we won't be lonely, afraid, or hurt ever again. And that in the context of God's strengths, our problems are small indeed. That's something to be thinking about as we prepare for communion today. Here's something to consider when we read passages like that of Isaiah prophesying about the root from Jesse. It's not about Jesse, is it? The prophet is pointing us along a trajectory from Jesse to David to the one who's greater than both. And with the wasteland presenting itself before Isaiah and Israel, rather than responding in anger or fear, he invites those who would listen to watch for new life, to erupt from everything the world had done to bring death and destruction. From one stump, a shoot that would come up would transform a broken wasteland, a people shattered and scattered, moved to wholeness and redemption. And maybe you feel that a wasteland of stumps is all that is in your life right now, or maybe a whole lot of it. But a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, and his roots, a branch, will bear fruit. So let God's promise make something fruitful of it, of your life. Look for Jesus. Wait on the Lord. Don't try to act or react more quickly than God seems to be doing either. And we can make a mistake on the narrow path to falter on more than one side, and there's more than one mistake. So what are you willing to wait for? And what if it takes longer than you think? What if it takes longer than the lifetime you have here and now?
extremely rare form of kidney disease that is genetic and can be passed on. When we reached the point where I needed a second kidney, and Beau was about 6 months old, and we had to make a pretty tough call, which was, does Ryan donate a kidney to me and enable me to obviously continue on living a normal, reasonably healthy life, or like my own mum who gave me a second chance at life with her kidney, do we save it? And we know that Beau's future means she will need one. And so we made, to be honest, I think the decision that any parent would make, and it was an easy one. It was one where Ryan's kidney would be reserved and given to her when the time came, if the time comes, for her to have a kidney, so that she has that same opportunity of, not having her health hold her back and be able to step into a transplant smoothly and not have to wait. And we decided that I would wait. So we started the dialysis journey, which is 3 days a week in hospital, on a machine, obviously filtering your blood to keep you alive, essentially.
That was just when she was unwell, wasn't even a transplant.
What started for me as 2 days a week in hospital ultimately ended up in really 4, if not 5 full days in hospital. I mean, I have no words to actually describe how sick you feel, and I tried in the moment to actually not think about it, because it would have just weighed your soul down to think about how sick, and you feel like moving is hard and standing and thinking is hard.
As a husband and a new father, I think one of the most difficult things is trying to process this painful situation where you'd love to step in but feel powerless to do anything. And so you pray a lot and learn to be comfortable in what's uncomfortable, and to grow in a tension that you can't resolve by yourself in your own strength. Now, there was a moment where I'd gone to visit someone in the church at a coffee shop, and across the mall, across the way, I hear a loud yelling, "Ryan! Ryan!" And I look across the way, and it's Benice Callahan.
I'm Benice, and my husband and I, Rodney Callahan, has been at the church, KBC, Riverlife, more than 20 years now. I mention him because we both had a really life-changing experience when we did the Rick Warren series, Purpose-Driven Life. For me, it was more about, instead of just being in the church, to be the church. One day at home, I was updating my bucket list and added a few destinations and a book I wanted to read, and I felt moved, I guess, of just wanting to do something more. As I was writing, the other bits on my bucket list, into my mind pops this idea of an organ. I went to my GP, and then got the first thing done was a ultrasound, where I was then informed that I have 3 kidneys. So I then decided, okay, I have to. I've got 3. I obviously was ahead of my time, and I think God was too, because the timing wasn't quite right, and they turned me down because of my interesting anatomy. And life goes on, and I actually forgot about it. It was like in that too-hard basket, until one day, 13 years later, I see Ryan in a shopping centre that I had not been to in 10 years or something. And my mouth opens, shouting his name, and what just happened? So now I've got Ryan's attention, and he's coming towards me, and I'm thinking, what am I saying? And the next minute he just starts sharing, and I think it just decided to go on leave. Bec was going to start dialysis again. And that's where we started joining the dots. God's timing, my timing, not quite the same, and I think it happens with a lot of people. Our timing doesn't always align, but He has the perfect timing.
You got a phone call that we weren't a match. So again, I probably had anticipated that more than B, because I knew that I was very difficult to match. When you have had more than one transplant, you have a whole range of medical things to take into consideration to be a match. So it was in some ways a surprise in the story, because it felt like it was just rolling along and that God was like, here's your match. But
I know, 13 years, the way the door closed, and we just knew we were the same blood type.
we did already know that.
We knew.
In brief, there's a way that essentially there's a program called the paired exchange, and you swap kidneys. So B's not a match for me, but she's a match for someone else, and that person's partner is a match for me. So it's like a triangle, swap. So we went on that program, which is still a wait list. Pretty much 3 years goes by at this point. And Benice and I definitely have formed in that 3 years a very close friendship, and truly something, probably feels like on another spiritual level. In many senses, the last 3 years, you're not actually even necessarily tangibly thinking upon these things. You actually just have a foundation in your faith that God has proven himself faithful and trustworthy throughout my and our entire lives. And truly for me, it feels so deep in my spirit that it's always okay in the end. It's always okay with God, even if it is eternity. And even if I had lost my life and I'd never got a kidney, and we even had a few tough conversations with Bo, because she was very aware of hospital and mummy being very sick. In the end, it's okay.
We believe that the story that's told through Bec and her faithfulness and the faithfulness of others, such as Benice and Rod and the people around us, will tell a greater story and to be a better witness, and we'll become better people through this.
We are all characters in a story working towards that center, which is how can I help and be Jesus in this moment? And there are some amazing people who sacrifice organs to, they donate organs to be demonstrating the kingdom, but that's not how it has to be for everyone. And when I was on a dialysis machine, there were times where I would pray for people or talk with people or even just befriend the people who were next to me. And for many of them, their transplant will never come. But it's asking that question of, I'm in this story, this is what I'm in, and how can I be just a character? How can I just be a character that actually is working towards the coming of Christ and showing them that he's here and he's made it okay, even in the good and the bad.
Taking you back to purpose-driven life then, the very first chapter is You Are Not a Mistake, which I guess really got my attention because not that I wore the label, but I was a mistake. Yeah, my mom suffered domestic violence really badly, bits and pieces that she's told me that she really had to fight for her life at times. She had already left my dad, moved on. Moved on to discover she was pregnant. So that was a tough decision for her to then be on her own. My mom did everything she could for me, and my mom's name is Lynette Weber. Amazing life, she's given me everything I need, but still, as a child, you just feel those things, and I knew I was a mistake. But how awesome is God, because he had the story planned. What still blows my mind is that when Bec prayed this very specific prayer, he had already answered that prayer in 1972, when I was conceived. To my mum, I hope that offers her some hope as well and peace. In what she had to suffer. Yeah, if I can even use this as an encouragement to, women still going through that area of domestic violence, you are not a mistake. Your children, your unborn baby is not a mistake. God has a purpose and a plan for each and every one of us. So I just hope this could offer some hope to everybody, because we're not all born with 3 kidneys, but it could just be that you're part of the body and you encourage others. Use your tongue, just to encourage people or just love on people, engaged and communicate or invite people into your home or whatever it may be. So it's much easier options. So yeah, just engage and actually step out. Don't be afraid. And I think for me, many years it was, I lived a faith as well, like, one foot in the church and one foot in the community. And then until one day, reading Purpose-Driven Life, it was about, okay, let's stop sitting in the church, be the church.
Not many of you probably have 3 kidneys, but it's amazing what God can do when you just let Him work in your life. Take the broken things, even if you thought it was a mistake. It was prepared for communion. Actually, I'm going to invite the ushers to come forward. We're receiving Christ's broken body. And what He has done is amazing. So that He's going to take the brokenness upon Himself and He's going to redeem it, bring salvation to the people for us.